Hello and welcome to another episode of the Future Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Wells, joined today by co-host Dustin Myers. We are partners at Longitude, a hospitality branding and design group. At Future Hospitality, our goal is to interview the brightest minds in the industry, gathering insights, ideas, and inspiration to share with you. If you enjoy the podcast, please be sure to leave us a review. Thank you for your support. In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Damon Lawrence, co-founder and creative director at Homage Hospitality Group, a new hotel brand which aims to inspire innovators through redesigning the hospitality experience. During our discussion, we get to hear about Damon's own journey in hospitality and how Homage came to be. We find out how Damon has overcome challenge after challenge and hear about some exciting new things in store for Homage. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Damon, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm super excited to be here. So thank you, Jeremy, for allowing me on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've been following you, kind of, sneaking around, following you around all the different blogs and different podcasts and different things that publications you've been involved in, and just kind of stalking you a little bit. So hope you'll be okay with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
I love what you're doing and your passion behind it. And so I'm excited to kind of learn more about what you guys are doing at Homage. And but before we do that, I would like to just kind of, for the listeners that might be listening to this that aren't familiar with you or your brand that you're working on, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the journey and your path that's taken you from where you've been to now where you're at with Homage, and what that journey has looked like in the hospitality and hotel industry, especially.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to talk about that. I'll try and make it brief, as brief as possible. But I started my hotel career while I was still in college. So I was at the Howard University in DC, and I needed a job. It was like my last year, needed a job just to pay the bills, get some extra money. Started working at a gym, and I didn't like it. And then as I was looking for another job, I was like, oh, there's this new hotel that's opening, a boutique hotel. This was on Craigslist, right? So I was just, scouring Craigslist, and they had a really interesting description. Applied, and it was a Thompson property, and it was the first Thompson property outside of New York and LA. And I thought it was an interesting opportunity. I applied, had the interview, wowed on the interview, and then got the job. And it was a brand new hotel, boutique, about 150 rooms, really cool design. It was called the Donovan House. It opened me up to a whole world of hospitality that I didn't even know existed. So I'm like so many other people where I just fell into it by mistake. Didn't go to hotel school or hospitality school or anything. And then from there, the day that I realized that I wanted to actually own hotels was Obama's first inauguration. So I'm working the front desk, and there's like a myriad of celebrities that are staying with us, right? We had, all of Bad Boys staying with us. We had all of the MTV video jockeys at the time staying with us. We had, Seal and Heidi Klum. We had Spike Lee was over here. Alfred Woodard is over here. And, it was just a really eclectic group of people that were all converged upon our lobby, right? And I think one of the interesting things was we had so much culture in that room. I mentioned Spike Lee, and there were others relevant in sports, media, entertainment. And then we're celebrating the first Black president, right? And what that means. And I was just amazed that we're doing all of this in a city that's called Chocolate City. But the building and the space in which we're doing it in was not owned by someone Black. And I thought that, man, that this would have been an interesting opportunity, and how different of an experience would it have been if that were the case. And so from that point, I was like, this is what I want to do. So I started doing research, trying to figure out if there was somebody else that looked like me that was in this space, that had a brand, boutique brand that I didn't know about? Was there any rapper who had invested in a hotel that I didn't know about? And I couldn't find anything. And all I kept finding was these historical references back to the Green Book era of all these hoteliers from the 1800s and the early 1900s that created spaces just for Black people to feel safe and comfortable. So that's where even the name came from. It's like, okay, if I don't have anything current that I could use and say, oh, this is what I'm gonna model, or this is the role model, this is the trailblazer for me to follow after. And I had to look at these historical references. I said, well, then I'm just gonna pay homage to that. And I'm gonna keep in mind that legacy of creating spaces, safe spaces, and what that means. And that's where I even got the name. And so that was 2008, and so from that point on, I just kept taking jobs that would allow me to learn as much as possible and get a firm understanding of the full hotel business. So I worked at Ritz-Carlton, I worked for IHG, I worked for a couple of small independent boutiques. I worked for even a motel for a period of time, and just took every opportunity to learn the industry until 2016, where I officially started Homage Hospitality. And from that point on, we opened up a small property in New Orleans called The Moore. It was a 4-room property. We used that as our proof of concept, really get the brand out there. New Orleans is a perfect backdrop for our brand because there's so many authentic stories we could tell. We had a marketing partnership with Airbnb that, did really well. We had commercials and primetime commercials and billboards in a bunch of different markets with me and my co-founder. And then the pandemic hit, right? And so then we had the summer of protests last year, and that brings us all the way to today. We're building out a pretty healthy pipeline of properties now, even through the pandemic. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's really cool. That's so awesome to hear that journey. And, I think, like you just mentioned, a lot of people that are doing really like groundbreaking and innovative things in this industry, like you just said, kind of fell into it by accident almost. And it just kind of snowballed into where they are today. And I think it's really cool to hear how you just along the way decided to pivot your career and focus on a passion that was building in you. So that's really cool to hear that. Yeah, and I would love to just to kind of back up a little bit too for people that might not be super familiar with what Homage Hospitality is. What's kind of like the elevator pitch of Homage, and what's if you had to kind of sum it up and the vision and the story of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, we're a brand that pays homage to Black history and Black culture, and we use hospitality and hotels as our medium in which we do so. And that's the real quick, straight to the point pitch. If you were to look at Ace Hotel and what they did, kind of celebrating 90s kind of grunge culture, I think Black culture, especially in this country, is so significant, right? And we're trendsetters in so many different ways. And how can we figure out ways in each individual city to pay homage to that, both current and historically?
Yeah, that's a really cool story. So 2008, you have this vision, even come up with the name, and then it isn't 8 years until you have started to see that come into being.
Yep.
While you're doing those different jobs and learning and gaining perspective, did you ever consider any other options, or were you dead set on this? And just what was that period of waiting like?
Yeah, good question. There was a part of me that felt like, especially early on, that, I need to become a GM. And once I become a GM, then I'll know everything I need to know, and then I'll be ready. And really what was the pivot or the catalyst for me to just say like, nah, I need to do it now, is really when the Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and all that stuff was happening. It seemed like at the same exact time. And I said, the timing for me is right now. And I never really thought about doing anything else, right? I had never really deviated from what the goal was. I always kind of sticking to it. I think what accelerated my process is like, I'm young, I don't have a family, don't have kids. And if I'm going to take the chance to do it, let me use my youth to my advantage, right? And not wait until I'm 35 and being a GM. And then now it's time for me to do it, because I felt like there was a moment that was starting to bubble up in society that was going to allow for me to make a bigger name now than if I were to wait. And so I'm really glad that I did that and decided to do that, because I think I was spot on. 2016 was a really interesting year. There was like the Walter Scott case, and then you had I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the one in Baltimore, but there was Freddie Gray. You had all these things starting to happen all at the same time, and stuff was starting to bubble up. It felt like, and at that point, it felt like a really good opportunity for me to seize the moment and put this brand out there at that time to build it. And it's taken me about 4 years. I say I went to college twice, because the last 4 years was really me learning the industry, learning the process, learning how to raise capital and how to have those conversations. And, that brought us to this pivotal moment where the preparation is now meeting the opportunity.
Yeah, I love what you said about using your youth to your advantage. I think that's just kind of reversing how a lot of people view things, but I really love it. What challenges, though, with that did you face? Was it hard to get people to trust you? Was it hard to find investment?
Yeah, good question. I think it was definitely a challenge and a learning curve, because I understood operations. I knew how hotels open, how they breathe and live, and all the intricate parts of a hotel that make it what it is and make it a successful business. But it's entirely different when you're going out raising capital to buy the real estate, and just the understanding and the knowledge that you need in order to make that happen. And so I quickly realized, this is the reason why no one else is doing this, because it's hard. It's hard, especially if you're trying to create your own brand. That is another check mark against you, because even the banks are looking for that Marriott or Hyatt or Hilton affiliation if you're trying to open up a hotel. So that's definitely a challenge. And then raising capital, I think for any Black entrepreneur, they'll tell you it's tough, not just in real estate, but also in the VC capital world, where we're really only getting about 2% of venture capital dollars, right? And it's not because we lack the ideas or lack the creativity or even the knowledge, but we're still not finding ourselves getting the funding. And when I think about my friends that are tech entrepreneurs, and I think about the capital that they need to raise and what that means, it's interesting, because for a hotel, the amount of capital that you need is so much more extensive, right? Like a tech entrepreneur can probably raise in the lifetime of their company a couple of million, and that couple of million towards one hotel deal doesn't even scratch the surface. And so I realized that this is a challenge, and is going to be a challenge as I move through this process and try and open hotels in different markets. Is where am I going to get the capital from? So that's definitely been a hard part of this journey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I read through your blog post on your website that kind of detailed your journey up till now, and it seemed like as I was reading that, you were kind of hitting, and you've already alluded to some of these in our discussion so far, but you're kind of hitting roadblock after roadblock, it seemed. And as a business owner and entrepreneur myself, I understand like a little bit how those moments really almost feel insurmountable. And so I'm curious, how did you manage to keep going after you were hitting those roadblocks? And I know you mentioned some discouragement you were facing along the way and how you kind of did that, but could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question as well, too. I think for me, what kept me going, as you keep bumping your head and things just aren't going your way, was really the fact that when I look at the world, when I travel, when I drive across the country, I see thousands of hotels, right? And my only ask, especially initially, is I just need one. So I know that it's possible, right? I know that it can happen, but it's just me figuring it out and figuring out whatever path and, keep prodding, keep pushing, because sooner or later, I'm going to break down that barrier if I just keep pushing through. And then there comes a point too where, you've invested so much time and so much energy. There was nothing else that I could see myself doing. Right. There's like I pretty much told myself at a certain point when I really quit my jobs and started working on this full time, like, who would I work for at this point? Yeah. Where would I be employable and where would I find any fulfillment if it weren't for me doing my own thing? I would pretty much be unemployable. So I think that was what really kept me going and made sure that I followed through. And I'm glad that I did. I think, it just takes time. When you really believe in something and you're excited about it, it's probably taking more time than I thought it would, but I needed to learn everything that I did along the process. One of the barriers that we had, it was, when I talk about that New Orleans property, we were excited about it because this was the first time that it had been done where, someone is really taking the lens of Black history and Black culture and using that as the design thread throughout the property and how you program and how you design it. And so this was cool for us to get our name out there. We won, up and coming hotelier of the year that year. We won a number of awards. We even won a Gold Key Award for that property, not once, but twice. And what we realized shortly after that, as we went to go do the next one, is that pigeonholed us into being more like this bed and breakfast, small room count property type of brand. And that wasn't the case at all. We just didn't have the resources to do much else and felt like this was an opportunity for us to get the brand out there and then, grow from there. And so it quickly ended up pigeonholing us in a lot of ways when you look at track record and that was the thing that you had to point to. That wasn't a full service hotel, wasn't like 80 keys in a top market. And so, just all these different things that you think you're doing the right thing. And lo and behold, you might have pigeonholed yourself to a certain extent. And how do you get past that and how do you get through that? But all of the entire process, when I look back at everything that we did, it was all worth it. I wouldn't take back anything, right? Because we needed that property to get our brand out there. We needed to get the awards, probably the highest awarded hotel company with the fewest amount of keys ever, So we needed that to propel our story so that when the real opportunities came, we would be in prime position for it. And I think what the beauty in that is we see ourselves in this moment now after COVID. Two things have happened. There's so many opportunities on the market that we can now take advantage of. They're at discounts. So when you talk about raising capital as a challenge, you don't have to raise as much capital now. And then when that social awakening happened this summer, everyone reached out to me because they knew I was the only one in the hospitality space that was doing what I was doing, right? So then the opportunities came even greater. There was more that came to us that we didn't even have to go out and search for because we had just made a name for ourselves in the industry. So we're really just in prime position to scale, to develop in some really cool markets. And I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's a challenge that a lot of small business owners face is which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And You got to prove
Right.
yourself before people will invest in you, but you need people to invest in you to prove what you can really do.
Prove yourself. Exactly.
So you
Yeah.
started small with the more, and then were able to make that transition into larger items that you had originally envisioned. One of the things you've mentioned is choosing markets that have untold stories. What Could you unpack that a little bit for us and give us some examples of what that means?
Yeah, so I'll take New Orleans as an example, right? I think if you go to New Orleans, you're going to understand the jazz culture. You're going to understand the music culture that exists. You're going to see pictures of Louis Armstrong. You're going to see, trumpets and saxophones turned into lamps. You're going to see all of that reflected. But then even in New Orleans, there was a deeper story that needed to be told. And through our property, what we were looking at was, if we peel back the onion and we, go even a step further, how did it even become the jazz capital that it was? Where did that stem from? And can we go back to that history, right? So it took time. We had to do a lot of interviews, did a lot of research. And then we quickly realized, the music scene that exists here is a direct link to slavery, a direct link to, the fact that New Orleans was home to the largest population of free people of color. And there were ways in which people could buy back their freedom in all these different things that we were learning in the process. And it's the music scene here started in what they call Congo Square, which is now Louis Armstrong Park, right? And Congo Square is where slaves were able to go and play their music, beat their drums, dance, right? You see the second lines that exist. That's where that comes from, right? And so we felt like there was another layer to New Orleans that wasn't really being told as to the origins of why things are the way that they are in the city. And we had an opportunity to link it back to that. And I think if you go to any of these cities, you go to Detroit, DC, Memphis, all these other markets, where are those stories being told, right? If it's not I'm not talking about a civil rights museum. I'm talking about just the history, the African-American history that exists in these cities. And how can you, pay homage to that? And even the culture that exists today, right? I think, Detroit has a very different culture than Oakland today. And seeing these cities in their trajectory, there's just a lot of opportunity for us. But we have to become mini historians. We have to dig deep. We have to spend time in these markets. We need to understand what these markets need, right? There's a very distinct need in New Orleans that's very different than Oakland, right? Oakland, we have a homeless issue that's out of control. So how can we use the hotel to do something about that? And then in other markets, they have different needs, right? So these are all the things that we sit down and think about and immerse ourselves in that local culture and find ways to weave both historical and local and cultural threads throughout the entire life of the property.
Yeah, Damon, you bring up a really interesting point of, you have like the historical research that you're doing in these markets to kind of to tell these untold stories. And, to a lot of people, that's probably a clear line of like, this is paying homage to these stories. But you brought up even like more, current event and current culture and things like that. And how you can really pay homage to even, current culture in these markets. What are ways that you hope to do that, and you are doing that with this brand?
Yeah, I think making sure that we speak to people that are there today, right? And I think that as we do our research and we do our interviews, it's different also for each market, and understanding where the city wants to see itself. And I think even if you're to look at Oakland looks like a much different city than it did in the past. And it's come a long way from even its Black Panther history, right? But there's still a story of resistance. There's still a story of a protest and what that means, right? You have Black Lives Matter that was started by 3 women from Oakland, right? And so that's a direct descendant of the Black Panther Party. And what that meant is just changed up and is modernized because we have new needs today, right? And so just taking all of those things into consideration is important to understand. And I firmly believe that if you look into history, you're just going to see patterns. And we tend to repeat history a lot, and we do it no good to ourselves if we're repeating it but not understanding the history and not understanding what came before us, right? I think when the pandemic hit, I looked a lot at that Spanish flu pandemic that happened just 100 years ago, and what happened. How did it, kind of materialize? How long did it last? And I looked at all those things very early on, like last March, and said to myself, okay, like we're looking at probably about 2 years, right? Talking about vaccines and what that's going to look like. And then, COVID might be here forever. It might not ever go away. Just, the effects lessen because it's the same thing that happened with the flu, right? We still deal with it every year. And what does that look like? And then you had the roaring 20s right after the flu pandemic because everybody was so, secluded and stuck in their home. And now finally, when everything is all over, business is booming, restaurants and, this is prohibition era. So everything is just rocking and people are figuring out ways to make money and money's flowing. And it's an exciting time. And so just being able to take all of that stuff into consideration as we look to what's next in our industry and in each individual market that we're in.
I'm curious which markets are on the horizon for you guys, and if you're able to share any of those timelines or plans around that.
Yeah, I think the one or the two that are the most critical and that we're working on right now at this moment is I'm actually sitting in our Oakland property. So I talked about before having a property under contract after the New Orleans deal in Oakland, and then the pandemic hits. But we were under contract on this property for about $26 million, right? Super expensive for 92 keys, but that's just where Bay Area real estate is today. And now we're back under contract at a 40% discount from that.
Oh, wow.
And so it really worked out in our favor. We're excited about this project. We're going to close all of our financing the end of this month, and then we're going to start redevelopment really soon. So it probably wouldn't open for another 18 months, but I think that's a good timeline for us to wade through the water, so to speak, and get through the tail end of the pandemic. And then we have a really exciting project in Albany, Georgia. It's an 80-key room hotel that we're super excited about. We just finalized the management terms just last week, and we'll be announcing that officially over the next couple of days. I even posted some stuff on social media quietly to let people know about that. But those two projects, but then we're also looking extensively in Baltimore. Baltimore is a market that I love and I'm excited about. And then we're looking at Memphis too. I think that's also another really cool and exciting market. But I mean, you could probably imagine some of the cities and markets that we would want to enter into. I mean, Birmingham, Atlanta, DC, Harlem, Brooklyn, Detroit, Chicago. All these markets are just really exciting for us, and we're looking forward to looking for properties in those.
That's really exciting to hear what you got in the pipeline. Awesome. Cool. Well, kind of as we're wrapping up here, one of the final questions we always like to ask our guests, being the Future Hospitality Podcast, is to just kind of looking forward into the future of hospitality, travel, tourism. You mentioned some of the things in your pipeline and what you guys are working on, but is there any other things that you're excited about personally or professionally that you're just that's on the horizon for these industries and your involvement with it?
Yeah, I'm excited because I think that travel is going to go back to the basics, and our need for travel is going back to what it's always been, and that is experience first, right? And I think we're always going to be, from this point forward, at least until the COVID-19 shock and awe wears off, we're going to be looking for those rich experiences, right? And that's what's going to drive the reasons why people travel. I'm also excited in the fact that I think that Airbnb, just in general, has created this ripple effect and trickle-down effect of causing people to look outside of, the typical markets and go a little bit deeper, even sub-markets within markets, right? And going into neighborhoods. And I think that that's really awesome for us because, to be honest with you, some of the properties that we'll look at are going to be off the beaten path, right? They're going to be in the south side of a neighborhood, but it's going to tell a rich story, and it needs to be there to authentically touch on the things that community needs in that story. And so Airbnb has just allowed people to think, differently in how they pick their travel and where they want to be. And Uber the same way, right? Location is different now because we have all these other means of travel and getting from point A to point B. And I'm just excited because I think we're about to have another roaring 20s, right? Everybody's talking about what they're going to do post-pandemic. And I see a lot of domestic travel. I think international travel is still going to be weird because what people aren't realizing is that we are pretty far along with our vaccinations, but other places are not. And just the social responsibility that comes along with that. And so I think we're going to be experiencing a high level of domestic travel over the next couple of years. So I think it's going to be a fun time for all of us independent hoteliers as we find ways to, create awesome experiences for our guests.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I hope you're right about the roaring 20s. I tend to be optimistic about it too. So that's exciting to hear you say that too.
Oh, definitely. I can't wait. I think that, again, history is going to repeat itself for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Damon, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about your story and what you're doing at Homage Hospitality. I'm really excited to continue following along and keep stalking you from behind the scenes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me on the podcast and giving me the platform.
Awesome.
Yeah.
For sure. Thanks, Damon.
Thank you, Damon.
You. All right.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Future Hospitality Podcast. If you enjoyed today's topic and episode, please leave us a review. If you'd like to learn more about Longitude, you can visit longitudebranding.com to see our portfolio of design work, read our Insights blog, and learn more about our team. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for Longitude Branding.